Hi, I'm Don Daly. I'm the Sunday Wood Carver, and it was a year ago that I did a video called Fun with Triangles, and that was here in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, and I'm back here again this year, a year later, and I have another project for you. This time we're going to carve this love spoon with a Celtic design on the top, and there'll be a heart design on the bottom. What's unique about this carving is it's going to be the first in a series of carvings that I want to do showing off different woods. A lot of people have asked me what are the best woods to carve, and the short answer is you can carve any wood. Some are more enjoyable than others because they're softer or they have a better grain, but it's also important to have the project and the wood suited to each other. So this one I chose, I think this will be good with this piece of white pine, has a nice straight grain, and I'm going to get started on this right now, show you what it's like. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is rough out our blank, which I've done on a bandsaw. And you can see that I left my original line there, and I'm going to carve down to that line so that I preserve the actual outline of the spoon itself. And this Celtic design, many of their patterns feature an under-over. It's a continuous line that just keeps going. But each time it goes under and over. And it's important to draw this out with a pen or a marker so that you know what to cut away. I happen to have a scroll saw, so I would typically cut this right out inside here. But assuming that many of you don't have that, you can just drill a hole and get rid of most of the waste. Remember to stay away from that line. And then I'm going to carve that out through both sides until I have the negative space that I want here. So today I'm going to use a few different knives, and when I get to the bowl I'm going to probably use a gouge. I'm not there yet. I'm going to use my favorite Stanley knife to do some of the rough shaping. I have a large blade roughing knife, and this is going to help me go around the outside and cut down to the line. And then I have a shorter, maybe 1-inch detail knife that's going to help me get into these small areas here. All right, you may not be able to see in this video, but there's very straight grain on this. It goes vertically right down the middle here. So if we think of carving a circular shape, remember that we want to divide it up into northeast, south, and west. So from east to north, we're going to carve in this direction. From east to south, we're going to carve in this direction. And then the same on the other side, down toward the South Pole and the North Pole, like this, and delicately transitioning here. So the first thing I want to do is take away these bandsaw marks and try to cut down to the line so I have this shape. If I just start rounding it, it'll always be a little bigger than I started with. I don't want that. Okay, so I got my thumb here and I'm doing a pull cut like this. And I'm just going to do light cuts because it is a little bit of an end grain cut here. I am more or less cutting straight across the grain. If you can't do this easily, you'll know that your knife isn't really sharp. So a shaving kind of a cut here, just a little bit, just to get down to this line. Okay, and then as far as smoothing that out and make it look nice and round, that'll happen later. Next cut, I'm going to go from here up. And I'm just going to, I got my thumb braced against the back here. This is actually a pretty safe cut because I got the wood. If the knife was to slip at all, it would go right into the wood there. Now here is the transition point, so it's actually going to be easier to just kind of slice across this way, just to get this smooth all around. Okay, now when I come up here, same thing, I'm going to transition into this corner, and you're going to notice that you have to just go the other way to get this to work. So you can keep turning the work, or you can turn your hand with a pull stroke and a push stroke. And you just have to delicately try to end at that corner, and you'll round that out later when you round over the spoon shape. So you're just going to continue around like this, trying to come down to that original line. So let me just take a moment to talk about knife blade types and why you would choose a certain blade for a certain thing. So right here, this is all grain going up and down here. So this cut is going to go in this direction, but I want to follow the curve and kind of scoop with it. So the blade of the knife has to be able to follow that. So this is a place where this blade is just not going to work for you, because the top of the blade is going to hit and your blade is going to pull away and you won't make a cut. So that's why you need a blade like this. Okay, so this blade can just follow right along that curve and the back of the knife won't get in the way. Okay, this roughing knife, I can do that a little bit, but I'm going to choke up on the knife and get out to where it's thinner so I can make that transition there. Okay, all right, so this is a tricky spot because this is all end grain, so you can only just take very, very light cuts. Your blade has to be really sharp, but when you have this final shape of this pattern, it'll be thinner and it'll be easier to work with because you'll be rounding it over as you go. Okay, so I don't want to go too far. I'm going to just stop there, otherwise I'm going to cut away too much. All right, so I just have to keep working my way around the pattern. Okay, so I carved all the roughness from the bandsaw off the perimeter, so I have pretty much the outline of the spoon that I originally designed. And I just drew out this hard shape on the bottom part of the spoon, and that's going to be the scooped out part. And so let me just show you a couple tools for that. So here are 3 choices that you could use for scooping out the bowl. All right, so from right to left, this is a Flexcut, has a slight curve to it, and it's a fairly deep gouge, and that's going to allow you to get in there. This is a fairly inexpensive way to go. I'll demonstrate all these. This is a little more expensive, but an excellent tool. This is what you call a long bent gouge, and the long bend allows you to get up out of the center. So this I use all the time when I'm carving regular kitchen spoons. This tool is specifically made for cutting bowls on spoons. It has an edge on one side and it's flat on the other side, and that allows you to put your hand on the back and help push it through. And this tool is used by just a sweeping cut this way to come in. Now this knife has a pretty large sweep, and it's meant, for carving out a fairly standard large kitchen spoon, so not necessarily the right tool for here. It's a little too big. Now the reason I've chosen this point in the process to carve out the bowl is because a safe way to do this is to actually have a board or your workbench clamp this down. So if I had curved all this out and I tried to clamp it, it wouldn't lay flat. So this way I could really hold this secure with a clamp. I'd have 2 hands on my tool, which is by far the safest way to go. In this tool, you want to come in and gouge out. I don't have a clamp, but you're going to gouge out the tool this way, working your way in while it's clamped down. This tool, I can pretty much hold the work and start to carve out little bites. Now the way to do a spoon bowl is to work your way toward the center. You don't want to just go up and down this way because you're going to grab a piece and it's going to chip right off. This way you ensure that you're getting from the edge toward the center. And when you get most of the waste out, you can come back maybe with a little wider gouge and follow along that edge and get a nice clean edge there. So to carve this part of the design, we're going to want to remove wood here from the handle. We're going to round this handle over so that this design sticks out. Next, we're going to want to clean out these corners all the way through so that this is like a thread going through. And then eventually we'll begin lowering the parts that go under and rounding it over and all that. So what tool is going to help us carve out these corners? So these are 4 knives that I pulled out of my toolbox that I think are going to help me cut out this waste inside here, which is a little tricky. A lot of it's going to be end grain, and I don't want to take too much off of this. I want to preserve that, just take the waste away. So this is a Flexcut knife that has a sharp skew on the end, and that's going to be a good tool to get into these corners. Help me notch that out. Okay, so what I'm doing right now, this is my original pattern, and I have my over and under pattern here. So really important to transfer this to the back side and keep those consistent. So this one goes under here. So I'm going to flip this over, and that means it's the opposite, which is over. So now this one goes over. Then it goes under, then it goes over and under. So now that I have these lines laid out, I can carve through and sort of meet in the middle on these 2 cuts. So I've already started this one. Let me come around to the back side and just try to clean up these corners. Okay, so 2 things I'm trying to do, 3 things I'm trying to do. So one thing is I'm trying to maintain this pattern and not cut into it too much, so I have, if I don't want to take off too much wood in any spot that I can't put it back. Secondly, I want to try to keep these corners nice and crisp because this is a geometric design with sharp corners. And thirdly, I want to try to have the cut going through from front to back be, you know, a straight line, so that they're, if I laid it down, they would be vertical cuts. Okay, so I'm going to come in, and this is where you have to just be patient with your knife. You have to kind of slide it a little bit to take out those corners. Now here's a factor, you'd have this with any wood, but you definitely have this with pine, is that once you cut these strings, let's call them, down to their thickness, the vertical grain right here, all these spots, that's short grain, and that's going to be weak. Right here is going to be weak. So you always have to remember all the way through this to cut, and don't put an over, you know, too much pressure that's going to break the wood. That's what I'm saying. Sorry. So I'm taking these corners out first, each corner, just to sort of get me started. And I'm trying to stay on that line, or just leave a little of the line. And I'm taking my time. If you've ever carved something like a chain out of wood, which is a really good project to hone your carving skills, you'll know that you just can't put too much pressure on it, because you're going to break the chain, and then at some point your chain is going to be a lot shorter. So remember that part of this is going to be cutting with the grain, part of it's going to be cutting cross grain, and right here I have to kind of ease the blade in because I can't cut into it that way. So you're all the way through this process, you think about the grain, you make a cut. If it feels like it's going wrong, just stop and maybe change directions. Okay? So right now I am thinking again, if I had used my scroll saw or a coping saw to cut these areas out, it'd be a lot easier than what I'm doing now. So like I say, pine is not an easy wood for this particular thing, but that's fine. We're trying to improve our skills here, and this is a test of skill. And we want to see how far we can push the wood, the type of wood, into the design. You know, how far, how complicated, how delicate, what can we get away with pine that would be better if I was using basswood or cedar or some other wood. So the other thought that you should be considering is, is this something that you're going to want to sand smooth, or do you want to just have only your knife marks? So just to repeat what I said in the beginning of the video, we're talking about the species of wood and what makes that wood a good choice for your project. So what I can share with you about pine is that, yes, it's fairly soft, but it's soft in a way that's different than the way basswood is soft. And basswood carves across the grain generally easier and with better success than pine. So what's happening to me here, either this is just too soft and mushy or my knife is just not sharp enough. I'm getting some tear out, so I'm going to have to clean that up when I shape this. Remember, there's still a lot of work to do. All I'm trying to do is get rid of this negative space wood here. So most of this is cleaned up. And when I carve the individual threads here, I'm going to be rounding it over, and we'll repair some of that. But before I do that, I'm going to remove some of this handle of the spoon. So I'm going to start just coming in a little. I'm going to make a stop cut here under my design so I don't break that out. Just like that. So a stop cut into it and then a little cut. Now I'm cutting into a cross grain, potentially weak area. So what I want to do right now is kind of make an angle here, not straight up and down. I can fix that later if I want, but for now I'm going to leave a little meat there just to kind of support the design there. Also, right here, I need to come down this direction. Essentially what I'm doing right now is just taking off the corners. Okay, and visually, I'm trying to maintain this line right here. Let me use my so that line, I'm going to cut up to that line and carve on either side. So where my corners are, I want to come in and meet, so that way I don't break the wood or tear it out or, raise up a big piece that I don't want to take out. So on this top plane here, I'm working my way to this center line. I'm going back and forth based on what the wood grain is telling me. If it starts to break out, stop and go the other way. Okay, also remember that this is going to be rounded, this is going to be rounded, there's going to be a transition here, so I probably want to come in like that to a corner, sort of start to work my way up to this line here. So I want to keep this thick. This part I'm going to cut back a little bit, almost like a neck on a guitar. So here I'm going to just sort of indicate the center, and I'm going to carve toward that center. And then off the back, I think I'm going to take some of this off and get rid of some of that material off the thickness. See how it's breaking there? So now I got to come the other way. All right, so I'm going to bring a new tool in. This is another Flexcut tool, but this is a great one. This has this kind of curve which you can rock and bend and twist and get all kinds of cuts with it. So what we want to do is stop cut on this line, so I can just roll the blade like that, and then gently I'm going to come into it a little bit at a time, keep my edge here. And then go to the other side. I'm just sliding it through. And then I'm gonna all right, all I'm trying to do is establish the under and over the little bridge here. Okay, so we want to imagine this as kind of a snake or a vine that goes up and down and up and down. And we also don't want to go too much past the center line for this cut. All right, so we want to leave half for the other side on the back side of it. So I'm giving it a line here all the way around. Okay. So let's do the same cut with this knife. You don't have to just choose one tool. So I start by making a stop cut here. And then I come in. So a stop cut. And this is going to be around, so you want to kind of rock it around. Try to do this safely so I don't cut myself. So I want to have a nice sharp corner and a vertical cut here, knowing that I'm going to round this over. Okay, using the Stanley knife, same idea. So we're going to cut across the grain, and then we're going to come in. The idea here is to try all the different tools, see how they work. See what feels best. I like to try different tools. Some people like to carve the whole thing with one knife. All right, here's this tool that we used previously, another good one. So just across the grain like that, and then start with a small notch to get you started. And then slicing cuts here with this blade. To keep trying different angles until you get what works. All right. Back to this knife. See how that works. All right, so the next step is to take this down to maybe about 1/3 of the depth of this. And then from this point up to here, we're going to bring it all the way up. Okay, I want this part to end about 1/3 of the way down. And you might find it easier to actually work with your piece flat on the bench and then just, it's actually much safer. Okay? Or if you have a chisel or a flat knife, you can carve down this way. So you want the up and down of this to sort of be smooth transition. So whatever you do on this side, you want to take this side down to about the same depth. So establish that depth and then just transition up. Work your way up. Try different tools, see what works. So to make this look good, this point here is your lowest, this is your highest, and this should be about halfway in between, okay? Okay, so I have some work to do on this, and then of course I have to do the same on the back. Okay, so two things you can do here. Each of these can just sort of be squared off and lay flat and go under and over that way like a ribbon. And that's fine, but then this top surface has to be consistent and nice and flat and perpendicular to the sides. So that takes a little bit of, that's a certain kind of skill right there of just getting that clean. Of course you could sand it down, but it doesn't show as much carving skill, obviously. The other way is to round all these over. So it's like a string or something going around. In which case you're then going to take the corner down little by little. And you're going to have to keep changing your knife angle to make that work. And then you're also going to want to carry that roundness around into the corners. So then you have to meet like that in the corner, rounding that over. So it sort of follows around. So the back side of this should come up so that you keep this part kind of even thickness all the way around. So this entails, you know, coming across here and grain, and have this come in and meet here without cutting into the intersecting piece. So just remember that the sort of the clock idea, or the north, south, east, west with a curve, it's the same thing here. So this is the middle, and the grain goes up and down here. So this part, you've got to come down, this part you got to come up, and you got to kind of gently transition. And you have to do it in such a way that you don't cut into this part, which you want to have the high point, and you don't want that a gouge in there that you can't fix. So that's it. We just would keep rounding this over, keep tweaking it, keep rounding it until we get it the way we like. If you prefer a smooth thing, then you can come and sand all this out. Now up in here, right here, the grain is such that I really need to be going that way. So, but it's in the corner, so how do you start that? So what you got to do is kind of get the tip of your knife and you're just sliding into it. That way you're coming in this way. Okay, if I try to go the other way, I'm going to tear the wood out. So I have to just, as best I can, get in this corner, and I'm pushing the knife in and go forward at the same time. So I call that kind of a slicing cut. And you can see I'm just taking, each time taking the corner off, and it's less and less of a bevel until it's rounded. So I'm going to have to go back and forth with different kinds of cuts, and I'm doing a pairing cut here, so good idea to have a thumb protector on, just to come up here. So two things, I need delicate cuts and a sharp knife, otherwise I'm not going to have success here. So here I can't go into it because it's going to tear the grain, so I got to just get that point in there as best I can and just work my way in the direction of the cut. There we go. So at some point during your carving, you may stop and say, why did I choose this wood? This is not an easy project. So I'm kind of thinking that about pine. This might be a little too complicated to carve in pine, but I'm going to finish it. So let me just take a moment to remind you that it's free to subscribe, and you'll get to see all my other videos. And also, if you ring the bell, you'll be notified when I put up a new one. Don't forget to like this video if you do like it, and leave a comment. Until next time, happy carving.